Oh, yeah. Sat in the back, trying to keep the Zoom experience.
Was that? Oh, yes. The light is bright.
We have a quorum.
Yep.
As a courtesy, I just wanted to tell you, that sometimes I ask to pull something out of the consent agenda, and you always do it, just like you agreed. And usually it's for reasons where, we're not on the same page.
Yeah.
If I do that this evening, it's only because
Everybody's mics are on.
vote in the affirmative on some of the minutes.
It's
because I
just,
was absent.
there's a way of hooking it.
Just so you know, what this is probably minutes,
Well, it's not mandated that you abstain.
Okay.
So why don't you just let it ride?
Okay.
Just, we have very long meetings.
It's customary that sometimes people will just approve the minutes even if they're.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'd seen people do that. So.
Yes. It's not.
Turn these off. All right, just gonna.
All right. I'd like to call everybody's attention. It is now 7 o'clock and operating under the Paul Shapiro rule. My phone says it is 7 o'clock, so we will convene the meeting, call it to order. The first item on the agenda is to call the roll. Ms. Chain.
Osberger,
Here.
Berthelot, Bruder,
Here.
Bertoni,
Here.
Freudman,
Here.
Kotchenberger, Moran,
Here.
Shuren,
Here.
Shaken. Thank you.
Before we proceed any further, I would like to say how grateful I am to have everybody here. It has been a very long time since we have sat down together, and it's really nice to see everybody in person. So, and I know we've had some members who've had some physical issues, so I'm very glad they're back, and looking forward to conducting this meeting. This may be a very long meeting, so I'm going to ask everybody to please pay attention to the time. keep our comments to the point and brief. The next item on our agenda is an opportunity for the public to address the council. You are all familiar faces for the most part, so I think you know the rules. You have a 5-minute limitation, and we have a timer running. We ask you to state your name and address before you begin your comments. You are free to speak on any issue, whether it's on or off the agenda for tonight. We ask you to be civil and speak directly to the council. You know that the council will not be able to answer questions directly, although we will take note of them, and the town manager and others will be back to you we'll give you the answers as soon as they're available. Not necessarily directly, but through the council meeting. So with that, who would like to address the council tonight? Ms. Friedland. Your voice is picked up on the television, but the people in the audience can't hear you unless you can sort of hear the echo, so you have to be closer to the speaker.
To focus on educating students rather than interfering in our town's business. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ander? Before you start, we're having some questions about technical issues. I got a text from, okay, so, well, I'm not sure whether it was just an audio or visual as well, but anyway, just audio. Okay, good. Please proceed.
Yes, good evening, members of council, Madam Mayor, and everyone else that's here, which is great to see. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you this evening. I have a strong community interest in affordable housing. It's something I've been involved with most of my entire adult life, particularly in Mansfield, and actually wrote the first law that was passed here that established the Mansfield Housing Authority. And now would like to see, and very happy to see what the town's doing, and I hope to talk with you at some point, Mr. Gruder, with affordable housing, which is on your agenda tonight, as is this issue in relationship. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had, I'm sorry. Sheila Amdor, 49 Separatist Road. I've given you copies of my testimony, but I've been really flabbergasted to see that the state of Connecticut has decided that it's up to them to determine what appropriate development is in the town of Mansfield. UConn, as a state institution, has intervened using state taxpayer dollars, as Mona indicated, to fund its own statist enterprise, to stop housing that it believes will compete with its own corporate interests, which I think they told you last year that they would oppose any housing that competed with their interest. It has reached a point that we must ask, is the town of Mansfield a recognized municipality that controls its own government, or is it now a subjugate duchy or duchy in the realm of the ducal estate of Yukon? Whatever one might think of these housing developments, there's a legal municipal process that is set up to decide if they will proceed as proposed or what changes are needed. That process does not include a state-funded steamroller that arbitrarily uses state funds, and I think they use bonding money, to oppose and undercut what they don't like. The town stands to lose very substantial funds that would underwrite desperately needed affordable housing, and I don't know if this is now the death knell of the project on South Eagleville Road in terms of what has just happened. When UConn builds student housing or works with its own private developers to do so, does it set aside units for affordable housing as the town requires of private developers? Does UConn pay into the town's affordable housing fund based upon the number of units it is building? And I think I know the answer to that. Of course not. The ducal estate of UConn does not pay obeisance to its serfs. Action must be now taken by you in a political realm. The town council must not only protest this interference, as the mayor did in the paper today, it must work with our elected representatives, the legislature, and the governor to stop what I really believe is an arrogant and flagrant action by the university to undercut a municipal system of government. Because this is by taking these actions, and it's going to take the actions against the next development that's proposed, it is decided it's the governing authority of this town. Thank you.
It takes some time to relearn how to operate the timer. Who would like to speak next? Mr. Ross, please come forward.
My name is Larry Ross. I live at 18 Hillside Circle in Stores. And before I start, I would like to say, Madam Mayor, that I was very pleased with your comments today in the Chronicle, and I hope that they're just the beginning of a cascade of comments by elected officials on the town council, as well as our state representative and state senator, for some pushback that's sorely needed at this point. It seems to me that the main sticking point for the capstone project was couched in environmental terms, that they felt that the Planning and Zoning Inland Wetlands Commission had overstepped their authority or had abused their authority by granting inland wetlands permission. And I find that to be so amazing, because when that same vernal pool came into play when they were putting their road in, Discovery Way, they had no oversight. And I was wondering why they didn't have any oversight. So I had a very interesting and very long conversation with Jonathan Pilto, who I haven't spoken to in many years, but way back when Jonathan was running, I was his first campaign chairman, and I used to go to the dump with him and greet everybody on Saturday mornings, as well as going door to door with him. I see you smiling, Peter. And Jonathan reminded me of something that I kind of knew, but I let slip. And that is that it was Jonathan's legislation in the early 90s that gave UConn a total free pass from oversight, not just from any state regulatory agencies, but from the town regulatory agencies. So they didn't have to go through any cumbersome processes for DEP, inland wetlands, state building. They became a quasi-public entity that was not beholden to anybody. And Jonathan said that there was a great hue and cry at the time in the town because UConn was going to be given such a free pass. But he said it was recognized that the reason that UConn 2000 came into being was that there was a phenomenal amount of money that was given to the university, something like $2.5 billion. And the understanding was that Four Corners would, of course, become the gateway to the university, and that the road, Discovery Way, would be part of that plan to take a lot of the pressure off of 195 and off of Hunting Lodge and off of North Eagleville Road, but that the Four Corners would be the gateway and that it would be built up and it would provide amenities that the town was lacking. Maybe some of you are aware of this, maybe some of you remember it. I kind of knew it at the time, but Jonathan burnished my memory for me. And so having said that, it's amazing to me that UConn is being such a poor neighbor when it was Jonathan's legislation that gave them this freedom and this amount of money. And it was understood from the very beginning that Four Corners would be developed, and now they're reneging on it. And I just think that the pushback should be hard and constant, and they should know that the town is not happy being bullied like this. Thank you.
Please hold your applause. We really are going to have a long evening. Who would like to go next? Ms. Sims?
Beverly Sims, 61 Northwood Road. Mona and Larry pretty much said what I was going to. I remember very clearly when UConn wrote the letter to the town stating their future opposition to any off-campus housing, and they came through with their promise. I feel it was a really significant loss to lose the capstone Shepherd project. Shepherd was an in-state company. Their representative was a true gentleman. For 4 years, he went to every meeting in this town, wetlands, PCC, town council. He met with neighborhood groups, and eventually wetlands approved unanimously his plan. The only thing I want to add are some significant dollars and cents facts, what we lost from that project. We would have had $2 million a year real estate tax from the project. They would have provided a $1 million sewer assessment. We're responsible for $6 million for the sewers. they would have provided 45 units of affordable housing within the development. They also would have paid a $1,460,000 housing impact fee, which was going to be donated to the Mansfield Housing Authority to help construct the 42-unit housing project on South Eagleville. The other effect would have hopefully been students moving out of neighborhood homes into these apartments. So I just don't want the same mistake to occur again. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Paul Stern. I live at 614 Storrs Road. I'm here to talk to you something about which you actually have control. That being the affordable housing plan itself. Specifically, I want to offer a modification, an idea for a modification, and it has to do with the payment in lieu of system that the plan mentions as a form of raising money. The payment in lieu of system allows large developers to, in effect, buy their way out of some of the affordable housing requirements in exchange for payments, large payments, I should say. I don't think we should allow this practice for as long as the town has below the minimum, the state minimum 10% of affordable housing. I don't think it's a problem long term, but I think in the short term, it undermines the town's effort to get out from under the state legislation that controls how we award housing projects. In fact, I don't think you should, I have my doubts about the whole thing, but I don't think it should be in place, this option should be in place for as long as we haven't established this housing trust fund that's also part of the plan. Because until we have a trust fund and some mechanism, some administration to actually use these payments to provide housing, we're just going to continue to slip back into this. It's a mathematical problem, actually. Right now, Mansfield has 6.6, townwide 6.6 affordable housing units, percentage. And if you look at these two recent projects that everyone's worried about, the Capstone project was going to provide 30 affordable units. I won't get into who would be living in them, but 30 affordable units based on a 294 unit baseline calculation. By paying their payment in lieu of, they were going to get bonus units of 64 bonus units, 5 units per acre. If you do the math, that means you're getting, when they build it all out, they're getting 30 affordable units in 354 total units, which is only 8%. So that means that their $1.5 million payment would have to be used to provide, to keep the 10%, 6 more units. I don't know, without a mechanism, without a trust fund, without an administration, without a plan, that money doesn't provide those units, and the town stays behind this 10% state mandate. This new project, the Havens Community Project, is even more egregious. They're proposing to build 398 units and to give you 17 affordable units. That's 4%. They're going to pay $1.6 million, or 5% of their estimated construction cost. They're going to give you $1.6 million to make up that difference. It isn't going to make up that difference, and when it all gets built out, we're going to be even further in the hole. So these are obviously business decisions that these developers are making. They know that it's way cheaper for them to pay up front than to lose the revenue on market rate units for forever. So my recommendation, again, is that you not allow this option until we've hit the 10% mark that the state expects for us. And if we are serious about affordable housing and providing this necessary element of our society, then I think that's what the town should do. Thank you.
Please stay tuned for our discussion, because I think some of your questions will be answered later this evening. Who else would like to address the council? Nobody else wants to say anything? All right, then I will declare. Okay.
Hello. Thank you for hearing our pleas to you. My name is Shoshana Levinson. I live at 370 Gurleyville Road here in Storrs. I've been here for 40 years. I just cannot get over the fact that it seems to me that our town kowtows to the University of Connecticut. I mean, I want to be a good neighbor, and I think we all do, but we cannot stand back and let them steamroll us. Who will end up paying our taxes? We will. And you know, the middle class, it's dwindling, even here in Mansfield. More and more of our citizens are retired, and we need a firm tax base. We need business. You know, and I look at the downtown right now, and it breaks my heart that because of the expense of renting there per square foot, most people who would really love to start a small business that could turn this town, our downtown area, into a thriving, one-of-a-kind place, people cannot afford it. So, I mean, I think that this is all interwoven, and I think that our town council has to stand up and do more, and you have to fight more for us, because we're watching and we're hoping that in the end, whether it's a gateway into town or just rock solid tax money, that's what we need. So I am for the project, and I am very happy that you could all be here to hear our voices. Thank you.
Thank you. One last opportunity. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the council? I know there are a lot of you in the audience who have thoughts on this. All right, going. I'm closing the opportunity for public comment. Thank you all for coming. Stay tuned, because there's more to come on this issue, at least through the manager's report, if not later. The next item on the agenda is the report of the town manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, it's been a pretty wet last few days. The community response has been very strong to Tropical Storm Elsa. I'm happy to report that despite the fact that a lot of basements may have taken on water, that there are no incidents of serious damage to property, no loss of life or serious injuries. Obviously, that's what's most important. We do have some displaced individuals. The American Red Cross has been helping with that. Residents on Thornbush Road in particular have been displaced, and Bassett's Bridge Road has been closed for a period of time and will likely continue to be closed through the end of the week. While our local response has been strong, it has come to light that there are some opportunities for improvement in terms of our public-facing communications on our storm response efforts. In particular, we heard from a number of residents who, while they acknowledged the town hasn't provided this information in the past, wondered why, when Bassett's Bridge Road was closed, why the town didn't let that be known. And so it's certainly my pledge that we're going to improve on that. We will get that information out. While it's the Army Corps of Engineers' decision to close the road, when we become aware of that decision, we're going to make sure that word gets out, because that's a very heavily used through road. As the council knows, municipal department heads and myself have been busy for some time compiling proposed projects that could be funded under the town's allocation of American Rescue Plan funds. The town of Mansfield will be receiving $7.5 million, roughly $7.5 million in rescue plan funding, and we've already received the first tranche of that funding. The first half of that has been sent to us, and so we have those funds on hand. And so we'll be meeting as a staff team in the days ahead to go through the master list of projects, figure out what projects we want to advance to the council for review and input. And we're also, and this is probably most important, maybe of most interest to the folks here and the folks listening at home, we're going to be soliciting public feedback on how these funds are to be used. You know, this is frankly a once-in-a-generation infusion of resources from the federal government to municipalities, and we want to make sure that we use those dollars wisely. And so we want to get public feedback, and we'll be publishing an online survey to that effect. So please stay tuned, and when that comes out, please do provide input so that we can make sure that our use of those funds reflect the needs and the values of the community. I want to touch briefly on meeting formats, not just the town council, but also Planning and Zoning Commission and other municipal bodies. This meeting and the second meeting of the month will largely reflect the pre-COVID format. And I won't go into all the gory details. It's included in the written report that you received from me, but I want everyone to know that IT has been researching options frankly doggedly, and by August I think we're going to have a really robust deployment of hardware and software that will allow us to do a very effective means of hybrid meetings, and that will have basically the best of both worlds. It'll allow bodies like this one to meet in person, the members to meet in person, members of the public that want to come to the meeting, attend the meetings in public, but will also allow both staff and members of the public to participate remotely if that's more convenient or more conducive for a given meeting. So more to come on that front, but the next meeting in July will be an opportunity for the council to, our IT director Jamie will be here, and we'll plan to put on the agenda under new business for you all to have a discussion with him to make sure that before we mobilize or finalize these plans that we have looked through all the angles and that you think we have the right solution in place. Tomorrow we're going to have our next meeting with representatives from both the DPW employees and professional and technical unions. So that's a multi-step process in negotiating the next wave of collective bargaining agreements. But we have those meetings scheduled for tomorrow. We'll be meeting again later in the month. Just a couple other things to touch on briefly. Following a competitive bid process, the Mansfield Downtown Partnership hired a consulting firm called StreetSense to work with its board of directors on its strategic plan for downtown stores. The StreetSense team met with the board in June, has been gathering information from stakeholders, basically to help shape the first phase of the work. I participated in the session. I know the mayor did. I think some others in the room did as well. And I think they're a top flight firm. They have a great track record of helping with community and economic development efforts. I think they'll be a great fit for what we're trying to do with the downtown stores area. We did have a bit of a health scare, if you will, with the summer camp. We believe that a number of staff and campers came down with norovirus, but I want to do a big shout out to our rec director Jay O'Keefe and his staff for the yeoman's work that they did in recent days. They immediately addressed the issue. They immediately coordinated with our district health and state public health officials to make sure that all the comprehensive cleaning and disinfecting that needed to happened so that campers could come back, and they did come back today in a healthy, safe environment. and they worked frankly around the clock over the weekend to make that happen. So thank you, Jay, for your hard work on that. I know your campers and the parents of campers really appreciate your efforts, because the camp experience is so important to young kids. And last but certainly not least, we do have a new resident trooper supervisor. Although it was a little unfortunate that local official town staff involvement in the selection process wasn't more robust, I did have an opportunity to meet with Sergeant Stephen King. No, not the author, different Stephen King. There are multiples. And yeah, no, it's not an omen of things to come. Yeah, this was actually his first day on the job, so he was making the rounds, and we had an opportunity to meet this morning. Certainly seems like a driven individual. Very, very pleasant demeanor. Very passionate about community policing. I have it on we'll put it on the council's agenda for you all to have a brief meet and greet with him at the next council meeting. He's looking forward to that. I thought with today being his first day, and I wasn't even aware until this morning that he actually was officially starting today. I'm not sure that he knew that before the weekend either, so this has all come together very quickly. So we'll make sure he has an audience with the council later this month. But he's been with the Connecticut State Police since 2008. He was promoted to sergeant in 2014. He spent the majority of his career at Troop C, which is the Tolland Barracks, and that includes Mansfield and a lot of other surrounding towns. He was previously a resident trooper in Mansfield from 2012 to 2014, so some of you may have met him and maybe recall that. And that was before he received his most recent promotion to sergeant. He's a married father of 2 kids, and definitely in the course of talking with him, seems to really understand how Mansfield, because it's a college community, in many fundamental ways is different from a lot of communities in this part of the state. And so I welcome Sergeant King and wish him well, and look forward to working closely with him in the years ahead. And the rest you can read in my written report.
Any questions for the town managers on his report? Mr. Katzenberger.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. As part of that, the second bullet point, which is as the department heads and you make recommendations for the use of ARP funds, I think as part of that, one way to address my earlier request are to consider whether we should increase and how we can increase broadband access. If that could be part of that consideration. I mean, it may ultimately not be funded if there is such a possibility. That makes sense, but at least I think that would be the best way to include it into the agenda.
And I'm happy to say, without getting over my head, because I'm not an IT guy per se, that we do have a broadband expansion project included in there. Like you said, there'll be a lot of competing demands. While $7.5 million is a lot of money, when you start talking about larger, more robust projects, it only goes so far. But I think everybody recognizes the need.
I've received a request that we consider as much as 30% of the money going into human services or social services or directly into the community. So it's my request, my personal request as council member, not as a mayor, but as a council member, that be part of your consideration as well. Any further questions for the town manager? All right, then we will move on to reports and comments of council members, and I will begin. First of all, glad you're all here. Glad everybody has survived the last year and a half. We've had the fortune of not having to see only the top half of people's faces because we've been online for all of our meetings. So here we are. Thank you. I'd also like to thank the Hartford Courant for its very nice coverage in the local community paper of our groundbreaking ceremony for the new elementary school. It really was a lovely day and a perfect afternoon, and the kids were cute as could be, and they enjoyed shoveling their sand. So it was really a lovely day, and the project is actually beginning. There will be a camera on site so that you can watch the construction. I gather the camera is not fully installed yet, but you can get to it from the Mansfield elementary school website. And now I have to talk about the other issue, and that is UConn. First of all, let me say that we have been working for several decades now to try to improve the relationship that the town has with the university, to get the university directly involved with the town in the most positive sense, not in the sense of dominating it, but in the sense of contributing. And we thought that that progress was being made. There are regular and ongoing staff-to-staff meetings, including some talking about economic development and housing. And of course, there is the Town Gown Committee, which is a formal and public meeting between the two, and includes members of the community. We have been stressing our common goals, and it was my belief that our common goals included economic development, the development of Four Corners, and the concerns of students and staff and faculty in our community as well as on campus. We knew that there were problems around these projects, but we tried to avoid a direct confrontation as long as possible because we believed that there were still people within the university who understood our common interests and goals. We do have common interests at Four Corners. UConn needs housing. It needs housing for graduate students. It needs housing for incoming faculty and staff, including lower paid staff in particular. They have spoken frequently about the need for research and development, particularly for opportunities for entrepreneurship in the community. And we believe that they understood that area with the 3 or 4 possible parcels for development would be an appropriate location for that kind of development. They were very cooperative with us in building the sewers. The sewers cost $9 billion. $6 billion is going to come from the town and sewer assessments on the people who are connected. So $3 million came through funds that came through the university directly to us. $3 million is coming from our own bonding, and $3 million is coming from assessments on the bordering properties. We believed all along that we had full collaboration, and of course the sewers do feed into the processing plant that's on UConn land and that UConn operates. We were shocked when we heard that they had arranged to purchase the land under the Capstone project. We knew all along that there were some members of the administration who were interfering with town business by having direct conversations with the developers to change the nature of the development. UConn has said all along they would support age-restricted housing, 50 and above, but of course that doesn't help their graduate students or their incoming staff, so we didn't think that was particularly serious, but we knew those conversations were ongoing. They didn't make me particularly comfortable, but you can't stop people from talking to people they're legally entitled to talk to. We knew that they were threatening developers with withholding access to the sewage pipes, and we knew that they were threatening continued litigation over inland wetlands and over whatever they could think of to sue the developers on. And of course, everybody has a right to appeal an administrative decision and to go into court. But these were clearly tactical strategies designed to stop the projects. And we believe there's documentation for that. By the way, there was no warning about this purchase for the town. We didn't even get a phone call. We learned about it like the day before, the day of the Board of Trustees meeting. If you look at the Board of Trustees agenda packet, it isn't even particularly clear there what this is all about either. This purchase of this land undermines our own housing goals and our own economic development in a very fundamental way. It also undermines some very important state goals. It's not just Mansfield's, it's state goals. The state has passed all the legislation on affordable housing. There's a big push up for that this year. Over the past couple of years, there's been a real support from the state government on economic development at Four Corners in particular. It was a state decision to give us the Economic Opportunity Zone, which is a federal program, but the decisions about where it goes is a state decision. So the state wanted this. We were supposed to be, Mansfield and Yukon were supposed to be a job creation machine. We were supposed to be the connector between Yukon and Boston. That all depends on housing, economic development, and the use of the Economic Opportunity Zone. And finally, we were all looking at job creation through the development of entrepreneurships and research. By threatening the developers the way Yukon has, I believe, and it's my personal belief, that they have seriously undermined some very significant state policy agendas. For as far as the town goes, there's all kinds of impacts. First of all, it removes developable and taxable land. There have been estimates that the development which they have undercut would have provided as much as $2 million a year in tax revenue. Not to mention the $1.4 million that they would have contributed toward the South Eagleville development, which was being used by that project as the anchor to attract further money. We expected very significant property tax revenue from this development, probably as much as $2 million a year. That's a rough estimate, and it's certainly a guesstimate. But based on what was being planned and the probable value of it, that's somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million is a pretty good guess. These threats against any kind of multifamily housing that might possibly house students they might want to have in dormitories will now make it will make it very difficult for us to attract developers in town, because any developer is going to say, can you guarantee that the university won't keep us in litigation for a decade? And also, at a very basic level, this is state interference with municipal prerogatives. The university is interfering with our right to plan our own future. I've already said the others about future investments and developers. So what are we going to do about it? First of all, it's a willing buyer and a willing seller, that we have very limited options on what we can do to stop the real estate transaction. However, we are preparing all kinds of official and town responses. We're having an executive session later this evening to discuss some litigation strategies. As you've heard, we have residents who are very angry and are taking action themselves. There's certainly nothing we can do to stop any of that. We've already had at least 4 hours of meetings with staff, with local legislators, attorneys, and so on, and there's more to come. We are really concerned about what this means for the future of the parcels at Four Corners that are being considered. What we do know about these economic opportunity zones is nationally, there are two kinds of developments that have happened on them in the past couple of years since they were started. The first one is if there's an actual shovel-ready development that the town or the developer has been working on, those go forward. But for the other kinds of development, it's almost all been residential housing in university or college communities. not necessarily student housing, but multifamily housing in those communities. So that's what the market is, and that's where developers have been coming to us. And we intended to use that kind of interest to further our own objectives in terms of mixed-use housing, in terms of mixed-use development, in terms of low and moderate income housing and job creation. And finally, this is going to has had a very bad impact on the town and university relationship. I can't tell you how difficult it is at this point for any of us to feel friendly. Although we have a new acting president, we are currently trying to get a meeting with that man, I don't want it to sound like that, with the gentleman who holds that office, whose name just escapes me. But in any case, he needs to know. He doesn't live in Mansfield. He's never been in Mansfield. He works at the health center. So I think it is really important that we have a meeting with him and help him understand this community and its needs. And we are working toward getting that as soon as possible. So those are my comments. Other members of the council have comments. Mr. Shakin.
Not a comment yet, but I just wanted to suggest, Mayor, that we, since everyone's here to talk about this and that you've just given the summation that might happen much later, that we amend our agenda to move this item to happen right after reports and comments of council members, so we can get it out of the way, knowing that we will have an executive session much later this evening with our attorney to further discuss. Is that something that would be in order?
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to make that motion to move item 8C on our agenda to take place immediately following the conclusion of reports and comments of council members.
Is there a second to Mr. Shakin? Mr. Bruder seconds. An agenda, adding to agenda is a 2/3 vote. I think moving is only a majority vote, but all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Okay, it's unanimous. So we will continue that later. Mr. Shakin.
I just have a quick report and comment, which is we talked a little bit about this as we were thinking about how to come back in person several months ago. But obviously all of us on the council have noticed that we've had only a little bit of public participation over the last 15 months in our meetings, even though there has been obviously an opportunity to Zoom in with us on those Monday nights. Very few have taken us up on it, so it's really good to see so many folks here in the audience participating in their government. It's been a while since we on the council have gotten a lot of direct public feedback at a meeting, and I hope we get a lot more of it, but it's good to be back with all of you, and thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you. And Mr. Freudman, one of the things that's happened is we've had several members who've had difficulty attending on a regular basis. So I'm very glad to see Mr. Freudman back.
It's good to be back. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to go back and give a little background. Back in February of 2020, the mayor and I were at the Town University Relations Committee. The mayor is co-chair. At the time, the other co-chair, the one from UConn, was Michael Kirk. I believe that was his last meeting, and then somebody else co-chaired that meeting from UConn after that. But that doesn't matter. Michael Kirk announced, again, in February 2020, because already J.E. Shepherd had announced that it would be applying to build those apartments. He said point blank, we're going to oppose it. Why? Because we don't want the competition. I asked him. Even though UConn only houses 12,500 students on campus on its residential life program, and that's only half of its total enrollment of 25,000 plus. He simply said it's too close. Anything at Four Corners that's not just for 55 or 50 and up, we're just opposed because there could be students living there. And I asked for a clarification because I was just flabbergasted. I said, well, why? And he said because the residential life program and the dining program are big profit centers for them. And I used to have some numbers. The numbers are probably 2 or 3 years old, but I think it was $6,000 for the meal plan, for the 2 semesters, and I think it was more than that for the residential life, for the dorm. And I remember, not much amazes me these days, but I remember thinking, here we are in the 21st century, and I'm actually seeing. I mean, you think this was 1890, before there was, reining in the trusts. Here I'm just hearing a big institution. Doesn't matter whether it's, Standard Oil or a big public institution, basically saying we're going to exercise monopoly power. And he wasn't shy about explaining why. He was honest. It was rather rich when some months later they filed suit, but they did it on environmental grounds, because you can't say to the judge, Your Honor, we just want to oppose this business because this development because it's competition. And then they all of a sudden became very concerned about the environment. And this was maybe 8 years after Yukon, as somebody mentioned, it might have been Mr. Stern, that they had plowed a road, Discovery Drive, through pristine wetland, plowing over some 15 vernal pools because they wanted to build their tech park there. And all of a sudden, they're great environmentalists. Look, the hypocrisy is manifest. But I have some other comments, Madam Mayor. I understand your pique. It's very justified, and I'm noticing that, and to a lesser extent, from other members of the council. And I'm referring to again, I don't like to get partisan, but I'm noticing that from the majority members. The mayor is correct in saying we've always looked for ways to cooperate with Yukon over many years. I've observed for years that, yeah, we cooperate, but it's always on their terms. We give, they take. If we happen to be on the same page, okay. If there's a conflict, they just steamroll us. Now, again, I'll be very brief in my comments. I, in particular, and others from my minority party have been saying, Yukon is not our friend. It's not our partner. It's a parasite. It's an exploiter. And I've mentioned that before. And I can give many examples, but I won't belabor that here. So I don't know. It seems kind of rich that now, but it's probably too late to do anything about it. People from my colleagues on the majority party are finally maybe beginning to notice they aren't our friend, and at least for the past 20 years plus, they weren't. They never were. So I'm eager to hear an executive session what our options are. Yukon is given as again. So it may have been Mr. Ross who pointed out that for years they've had the right to buy any property they want. They don't need approvals from. They've never needed approvals from the town. They're not subject to local law, ordinances, regulations, and the state pretty much lets them do what they want, and they're allowed to by statute. So I just wish there had been this realization that Yukon was not our buddy. Look, again, I don't mean to get personal, but 6.5 months after Michael Kirk stated what I just said, he stated in the Town University Relations Committee, we'll oppose you because we don't want the competition. A member of this council from the majority party in one of the meetings we had in August of that year said that the interests of the university and the town are congruent. That was his word. I, of course, disagreed with that and said so at the time, but I've been saying that for years and it's fallen on deaf ears. I think I've made my point. I don't know that we can do anything about this quagmire, but we are in bad shape. Yukon almost sucked us into that sewer agreement. At one point they said, you'll have no trouble hooking up, just like we let you hook up when you built the downtown. But the downtown was in their interest. They wanted to see, dorms, basically dorms, apartments, just off campus, so that they wouldn't have to do it. And they really wanted to unload that property for other reasons also. And they just wanted a gleaming downtown as a recruitment tool for faculty, students, and staff, so it can have all the water and sewerage connection with no conditions. They were very happy to do it. And then some years later, they led us to believe that we could do the same at Four Corners. They kind of gave us that impression. And so we started spending money doing engineering studies, And then just at a critical point where we already had put in a lot of money into it, then they shove a sewer agreement in front of us. Again, I won't get into that, but it's very disadvantageous to the town. I was very sorry at the time that the town agreed to it. And they are real bullies. Now that we built that project, sewer, and we are $6 million on the hook, mostly in loans, plus we had put money into it otherwise. And we've increased our debt service by approximately $200,000, maybe a bit more. And we're not going to get a lot of money from just the assessments, just because the sewer lines are running in front of, the few dozen or few score properties in front of it. We'll get some, but it's a little bit. I mean, you can't hit homeowners with huge bills because there's a sewer line. But of course, over time, they'll have to hook up and we'll get a little more. But that's a very long process. And meanwhile, here was a chance that we could really start getting some real income that would help defray these costs, debt service being one. And UConn is just saying, don't you dare, Mansfield, don't you dare even think of building something in your town that we don't want, because we have deep pockets and we'll steamroll you. They just did it again. That's my comment.
I just want to comment that what we have been told by UConn is that every student who moves off campus costs them $10,000. So clearly that is one of the underlying issues. Anybody else wish to make comments?
Do you want to move on to the agenda, or do you want to do
I'm waiting to see if there are members of the council who wish to make comments. Mr. Osberger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few things. First, that's Thomas Katsoulias is the president. Well, that's who I think you're referring to. No? Oh, in between. All right, very good. Anyway, just quickly, previous to all of these other iterations of projects that were going on, there was a project that was going to happen on King Hill Road when I was on planning and zoning, and this also was cut short because UConn said you can go ahead and build it, but we're not going to let you have any access to the water, and so that cut that project off. And lastly, unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the January 14th meeting for town council, and wonderfully expressed proclamation that was put forward for Mansfield Drive-In, June 14th. I'm sorry, and I was wondering, is that something that we could put on a future agenda to perhaps publicly offer to Ms. Youngden? Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Anybody else? Okay, then let's move on to what was item 8C, and that is the report on Four Corners land purchase. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, obviously, a lot's already been shared on this topic, a lot of public comments and your own remarks. So I guess just to, tee up this conversation and hit a few of the highlights as far as, the facts surrounding this land purchases, we understand them. So as the mayor said, on June 30th, the University of Connecticut Board of Trustees approved as part of its consent agenda $4.2 million purchase, $4.2 million to purchase two parcels, which combined would be the home for proposed 358 unit multifamily housing development known as the Villas at Four Corners. That application had been working its way through the land use board review process, and as the mayor said, basically the acquisition by UConn did come out of left field. UConn's purchased the property's impacts the provision of affordable housing in our community, The proposed project includes 30 units that would have been affordable to residents at 80% of median income, and 15 units affordable to residents at 120% median income. We know that approximately 1/3 of UConn students currently choose to live off campus or commute onto campus, and that rental demand significantly exceeds supply. And so this proposed development certainly seemed like it, along with another large-scale proposed development in the same area, Four Corners, that's a project on the Moskowitz property proposed by a different developer, Haven Communities, collectively would address student housing needs as well as affordable housing needs that we've been talking about at length. There are obviously also a lot of concerns. I hear about these quite frequently, and I know in my 7.5 months is only the tip of the iceberg. I know these conversations have been going on for many, many years, but concerns about the pace at which single-family homes are converted to rental properties. And obviously, again, to the extent that, you know, part of the community's goal would be to have families moving into and buying up single-family homes and populating those homes, having high quality available multifamily housing in relatively high supply in the community helps address that concern as well in terms of what's happening to the character of neighborhoods over time and the compatibility of, you know, existing families that live in these homes and the number of students that move into these neighborhoods to rent. Nobody obviously begrudges students for renting. We all go through that phase of our lives, and we all want housing needs and demand to be met for anybody in the community, regardless of what stage or station they are in their lives. Mansfield's affordable housing plan, in alignment with the state's call to provide affordable housing in all communities, is intrinsically linked to our community's development plans, and the demand for student housing, which typically rents on a per bedroom as opposed to per unit basis, pushes up the market rate for housing beyond the reach of many working families and adults. We've talked at length about the revenue concerns, and that's somewhat speculative, but while we might debate what the actual number is in terms of foregone tax dollars or sewer assessment fees, I think we can all agree that it's substantial sums of money, which whatever that final number is, would take a lot of pressure off the existing residential tax-paying population. And so these are some of the very real implications of this project, and it's obviously really important that you all discuss it as a council.
Sure.
Just a quick question. Does this have any relevance to our hope that Congressman Courtney would include an earmark proposal on 195 for sidewalk?
Certainly. What Councilor Sharon refers to, it's still very much in process, so we haven't gotten to the end game yet, but the town submitted a funding earmarks. For those who may not know, while they've been on a hiatus for over a decade, they're now, you know, back in vogue in Congress. Although they call it member-directed funding, it's a little, I think, less pejorative term than an earmark. The town put in a request for, I believe it was around $2.28 million worth of funding. It's 80% funding by the federal government if we got the funds to put in a 10-foot wide, we're calling it a multi-use, multimodal path, but that would extend from basically the Horse Barn Hill Road area up to the Four Corners. Thought process being, we see a lot of student-age kids walking in the road, and this was a much safer way for people to get from A to B. And also, you know, as the council member rightly points out, anticipating future growth and increased demand and increased desire for people to get from the Four Corners to the UConn campus and vice versa, that this was a way to kind of have the infrastructure get out in front of that. And UConn, you know, unfortunately didn't support that project at the time. We invited them to submit a letter of support. They did not. And certainly, you know, recent actions, I guess, you know, would certainly call into question some of the long-term need for that project.
Well, as long as there's students walking on 195, which there already are, before any kind of development, we're going to need that sidewalk. Anybody else wish to comment on this or ask a question. Yes, Mr. Kotchenberger.
One of the comments we received earlier this evening was about the potential effects on the South Eagleville Road project. I wonder if you had any thoughts on that. I mean, they're not directly linked, certainly, but do you see any adverse effects on South Eagleville Road?
Yes. So what was referred to earlier is that this particular project carries with it a proposed donation to Eagleville Green Affordable Housing Project. That would be $1.4 million. And so, if this project doesn't move forward, that contribution then doesn't happen, and obviously would have a significant impact on the ability of that project to move forward.
Very much so. Thank you.
I think there was a question raised earlier about whether or not the money which would be contributed by a developer had an appropriate home if we don't have a housing trust set up. Could you explain how that money would have been used explicitly? It would have gone to the housing authority or the nonprofit which is building that rather than
those finer
Limbo.
details would probably be better addressed by Linda Painter, our Director of Planning and Development. I wouldn't want to provide guidance that was a little bit off.
Okay, but that was clearly the plan that that money would go directly to that project.
I did want to just momentarily clarify. I didn't complete a thought I was expressing a moment ago. You're 100% right as far as the need of the sidewalk for safety currently. The thought that I didn't complete was that given that this project is still competitively up against other projects, we wouldn't want anything to impact its viability in the context of those other projects, was I guess the point I was trying to make.
Go ahead, Mr. Ferdinand.
Just a very quick clarification. This 1.4 million somehow eluded me. Who's paying it, or who is expected to pay it to whom, and for what purpose?
The developer was expecting to pay. It was payment in lieu of developing a certain number of housing units, and it was going to the town, and it was going to go. The arrangement that had been made with the developer was it would go to the nonprofit housing authority for the purpose of supporting the Eagleville Green project. And the Eagleville Green project was using it as the indicator to other lenders and grantors that they had a resource. Ms. Painter has just walked into the room, and I would like to ask her if I have stated this correctly.
I'd like to know which developer is supposed to pay it to the town.
The developer of the Capstone property. That's the only one we're talking about right now.
Good evening. I think that's a fairly succinct summary of the zoning regulations. Because the town has not created an affordable housing trust fund at this point, it offers developers the option to provide a fee to another affordable housing project in town. And so in the application for Capstone, I believe as noted by one of your speakers earlier this evening, they requested a density bonus. And in exchange for that density bonus, there's a way to calculate the fee that they can pay for that. That affordable housing plan proposed donating that to the Mansfield Nonprofit Housing Development Corporation for the purposes of supporting the project at Eagleville Green. That project, as of the latest information that staff has from the nonprofit, they are looking at developing 14 units that would be affordable to families at 50% of median income, and 14 units to families at 80% of median income, and then the remainder of the units would be market rate. So a total of 28 assisted units based on the funding sources that they're currently providing. And I will note that that is subject to change. The number of affordable units and the level of affordability is always based on the funding source. So for the grant or the loan, that they're pursuing. But you are correct, Mayor, in saying that this, I think they were looking for this as leverage. I can say a year ago, prior to this application coming in, the nonprofit was contacting staff and asking us if we could estimate how much they might receive in a fee in lieu as they were pursuing funding through the state, so that they could identify to the state the potential funding that may be coming their way.
Ms. Painter, one of our members of the public raised the question of there's a request for bonus apartment development if they give this payment in lieu of. If they increase the number of apartments from what, if they're going to build 300 and as a result of promising to give this, and there's a certain 10% of that is 30 apartments and they give certain amount for 30 apartments. So if they get the bonus and they go up to 350 apartments, does the percentage that they give the town go up?
No, because the intention was when the commission wrote the regulations, if you were giving a density bonus because you're doing more towards affordable housing, they saw asking them to add more units as then almost a penalty. So kind of you're going to give the payment and we're going to make you create more units on site. There are also other ways that you can get density bonuses, including doing additional units on site at various levels of affordability. But again, the idea was not to say, okay, if you do this, then you have to create, it would be an almost unending cycle of, to get a bonus, you now need to create more affordable units, which starts to affect economics. So I can say the commission, and I think we'll talk about this later this evening, has acknowledged during their discussion of the affordable housing plan that they need to go back and relook at the regulations, both in terms of the minimum affordability requirements, but also I think looking at the fee in lieu. Those provisions have been in place for a couple of years, and this was actually the first project looking that would be developing under them.
Mr. Freudman?
No, I'm totally confused. It's 1.4 million that we might get from Capstone if that
Might have gotten.
Huh?
Might have gotten.
Might have gotten, if you're exactly. Yeah, I would always say that's revenue. That should just be revenue for the town. But why not give it to a third party? That's always my inclination. It goes into the general fund. Now, why would we even think of giving $1 to the Mansfield Nonprofit Housing Development Corporation? This was brought to the council, I think, last year, maybe a year and a half ago. This corporation calls itself nonprofit. Basically, cracked the code. They hook up with the Mansfield Housing Authority, which arranges to buy the land. It could be that they own it, or the Connecticut Housing Authority, or the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, whoever. And then they put this building on it, and they claim it's going to be for affordable housing and workforce housing. And what the public has never been told, it was never in any of our packets. I did, find out the information. Of those 42 units, only 13 of them, 30%, were in the category of affordable or workforce housing, and 70% are just at price gouging market rates. And this town, under your recommendation and with the approval of my colleagues across the aisle, gave basically tax-free status to all 42 units, a pittance, $215 per year per unit. Whereas if they had been charged market rate, at least for the 70% that are going to be rented at market rate, it would have been at least that much per month. So why are we giving them any money?
So would you like me to respond, Mayor?
Yes, I would also, but before you do, I would say that the development was very clear as to the number of market rate and the number of low and moderate income housing and the percentages. It was in the proposal. They certainly made it clear when I went to their open house.
Not in the packet, though, where the agreement was. It was just mixed use. They never gave us the number in the agreement.
Well, the issue before us is the consequence of the Capstone land purchased by UConn, and one of the consequences is the loss of this funding. I'm not going to entertain any discussion of whether or not the Eagleville project is a good one or a bad one. I'm just talking about the impact on that project of the loss of this funding, or the probable loss of this funding. So let's not go into any discussion of whether it was a good one or a bad one. If somebody wants to raise that at an appropriate time on another agenda, they can do that. Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Mayor. In returning to the Yukon Four Corners land purchase agenda item, I have to say, I found out about it over the weekend, like many people did, and as somebody who's working hard to further Mansfield's affordable housing goals, I was troubled. I mean, it's something where you're not going. Communities are not going to find a developer who is going to want to come in and go against a state agency like Yukon, who has the ability to work on multiple fronts. In the Chronicles paper today, article, there was a real big emphasis on the vernal pools and how that impact of this apartment complex would affect their future development around the research park. We've heard of opposition to the affordable housing project over on South Eagleville Road that we've talked about from Yukon, and it's starting to feel like a pattern. I don't want to say that everything that Yukon does is at all negative in any way, but I think that this requires our attention, because not only do we have the state mandate for what we need to do for affordable housing in our community, of reaching that 10% threshold, and we're identifying that with the Housing Trust and the Affordable Housing Committee that we're working towards finalizing the details. We also have what we thought this donation that unless it's included in the bonding, we will no longer have. So I'm disappointed in that it's come to this, that we're at this juncture on this project. So hopefully the meetings that you, Mayor, and our town officials and others are having can result in some sort of additional bonding that will reimburse us for this project, or be added. I don't know the logistics, certainly. I'm not working at the Capitol, but we appreciate certainly that the pilot funds are going to be increasing, it looks like. But in terms of what we're trying to do in our affordable housing, this is really a step back. So,
Mr. Sherman?
I just wonder how realistic the university's fear is that the proposed housing would have competed with residence halls. It seemed to me, when I heard about it, that it would compete with Carriage House and other places that were off campus but less desirable, and that would probably raise the quality of off-campus housing generally. Students, freshmen, most sophomores, for various reasons, prefer to live university housing. After that, then the great relief to us would have been people moving in who would have otherwise moved in rental housing, not otherwise stayed in dorms. But perhaps in your discussions or staff's discussions, more came out about that. But again, I'm not sure that was a realistic fear on the university's part.
Mr. Katzenberger.
But also, partly in response to both David and Ron's comments earlier, I think it was in the same council here. It was here maybe 3 or 4 years ago, in which Yukon, we were asking them to take more students onto campus to relieve the pressure on single-family housing, and we were told very clearly and documented that, in fact, Yukon was already taking more students than most universities, and it had no plan to increase housing or dormitories, at least dormitories. Institutions have a right to change their mind, but it is part of a long-term pattern of, at least in this instance, of simply looking after whatever arguments fit the need for the perceived need for today.
Thanks. And just going off of what Peter said and a little bit of what David said, I want to address that institutions have the right to change their minds. And it's one of the things that's been so shocking, I think, to me
over the last year or so that the university has been so, I guess, year and a half, that the university has been so publicly opposed to the development of any kind of housing in the town of Mansfield, that is a significant shift from the position of the University of Connecticut over the last several decades. You know, the project across the street has many hundreds of units of housing. University and the town completed that successful project hand in hand. Everyone in Mansfield who has watched what's happened over the last year as the student population has been dramatically reduced due to COVID knows that the success of business in this town hinges on the existence of multiple tens of thousands of students and staff who are here mostly seasonally, and those people need a place to live, which is to say, there's no way to develop a business at Four Corners that doesn't have housing nearby. And UConn knew that, and UConn has always known that. The town and UConn have worked together to develop the land at Four Corners for a decade. The sewer project was something that was already long in the works by the time I was elected to this council 6 years ago. In fact, it had been passed by the voters the year before. It had been being worked on for a decade before that. And housing was always part of the conversation of what would be developed at Four Corners, always, until there was a plan on the table to develop that housing. And then all of a sudden, the university announced very publicly, as Mr. Fredman has noted, at the Town and University Relations, to this council in a letter to the town manager, to the Planning and Zoning Commission, over multiple testimonies opposing every facet of every development proposal in this town, that they would be opposed to any and all development of housing as long as they felt like it's something that could go to be rented by students. And as a community, as a town, as a government, we don't have the right to tell people where to live, and we don't have the right to tell developers who they can build housing to serve. If I built a house and I put it on the market, the town of Mansfield couldn't come and tell me that a student couldn't buy my house or couldn't rent my house, or if I owned an apartment complex, couldn't rent from me. And that is essentially what the university has done through legal action and now through this purchase. So I agree with Peter's comments that institutions have the right to change their mind, but this is a 180-degree shift over what we have, over the consternation of some, tried to develop collaboratively over the last 2 decades. I moved here in 1998 and I was 10 years old, and we were embroiled in a battle with the university then over the development of a Pfizer facility at Four Corners. And I will say, officials before me in this council and in town hall have worked really hard to repair those relationships that were at a low point then. We're there. This is as bad as it was then, and it's really problematic. I know we're going to talk later. I just want to express publicly my desire that we do everything within all the different kinds of our power to stop either this or future thises from happening. Just also to touch on affordable housing and how this is all sort of intertwined, and we're going to talk about the affordable housing plan in a minute, but one of the things that I think makes Mansfield the most attractive place and the greatest place in the state to live is the fact that we offer what we offer to our residents, and we do it at one of the most affordable rates of any town in the state. When you look at towns that have comparably good school districts, comparably high public services, you look at their housing values and you see things that are double what it costs to buy a median house in the town of Mansfield. You look at tax rates that are higher. And all of that's possible because we have this big institution in the middle of a small country town. And when the Planning and Zoning Commission looked at one of the things that we were missing, and they saw what we're missing is housing that's affordable to people who are making 80% of the area median income, which is, help me here, $50,000 a year in salary. And to their credit, unlike many other communities in this state who have been working for decades to keep affordable housing out, the Planning and Zoning Commission, in a very careful and thoughtful way, rewrote our entire regulations to mandate the development of affordable housing in Mansfield and set in motion the means for development to occur while increasing residents' access to affordable housing, whether that's in developers building units, in paying fees in lieu that could lead to development of separate units elsewhere, or revitalization of units that could become affordable that are already existing. and to have an institution who we should be working collaboratively with, who we all owe a lot to, and who gets a lot from us, to come in and say, that's not important to us. What's important to us is to stop housing that could affect our bottom line. And so we're going to prevent the town from doing any sort of development whatsoever. It's just beyond the pale. So I think that's all I have to say for now, but I'm very disappointed in this. I was as surprised as anyone. I thought, well, maybe we'd be in court for a few years, but everybody would come to the table and figure it out eventually, which is usually how things like this work, and to have UConn step in and use taxpayer dollars. I noticed Ms. Rietz's quote in the Chronicle today stressed that the funding that was used to pay for this project didn't come from the university's operating budget, that it was bond funding. That's worse. This isn't money that the university's raised from tuition or from private donations. That would be bad too. But this is money that has been authorized specifically by the State Bond Commission for the development of the tech park, something that's supposed to further the economic development goals of the state of Connecticut. That's money that the state has borrowed, that I'm paying for and will be paying for the next 30 years with interest, that they have used instead to purchase this property to stop development from happening. And that is beyond the pale. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Freudman for the second time.
Yeah, I don't think we have a motion on the table about first or second time, but okay. I agree with all the comments that Ben and Peter said. Of course, as I mentioned before, I'm not surprised that UConn uses these bullying tactics. We've always felt they just exploit the town if they cooperate with us, because it happens to be in their interest at the time. But I want to say something about what Peter mentioned. I remember that meeting, 2015, I think it was. It might have been 2016, when Michael Kirk, again, a high representative from UConn, was claiming that UConn is great. It really compares very well to other universities across the country because it houses 70% of its students. You all heard me before say it really only houses 50%. They have 12,500 beds on campus, 25,000 plus actually total enrollment. But so I looked at those numbers and I realized they were omitting from the denominator 5,000 students. They omitted all the graduate students. So those were very dishonest numbers, and they were dishonest in another way. They were just comparing us to universities around the country that are in big cities. I mean, it's the LA, Pasadena, San Francisco, Austin, Knoxville, Champaign-Urbana, Boston, big urban areas where, many of the city's residents rent in their apartments all over. But we're in a very rural area, and they didn't compare us to any of those universities. I checked a couple of them. I remember Skidmore College in Saratoga Springs, which is a small city, probably a little bigger than we are, but they were housing 90% of their students. So it just shows you UConn is dishonest, and it presents deceitful, selective data. But we saw through this years ago. 70% indeed. Never.
Right. If there are no further comments on the Capstone project, the town's strategy is going to be discussed in executive session. Our legal strategy will be in executive session. It is pending litigation is one of the exceptions that allows you to discuss it there, and so that's where we will be having our more detailed discussion of exactly what our strategy is. So now I would like to proceed to the next item on the agenda, which is a consent agenda. I'm going to ask that if people were absent from these meetings, one of your options is to abstain, but it is not required that you abstain. So in order to get this agenda moving, if you have been absent, I would ask if you not exercise your right to abstain to the whole agenda, and simply, unless you have a problem with the minutes as they are presented, to approve the consent agenda. So there are three kinds of items. There are 4 sets of minutes. One of them was the special meeting at which we finalized the budget. The second was the regular council meeting of June 14th. The next one was the special meeting at which we set the mill rate following the town meeting. And the fourth one was another special meeting. And then we have appointments to town committees, which are specified in the attachments, and also an appointment to the Partnership Board of Directors of Steve Farino, is currently serving. He's the chair of our Economic Development Board and an appropriate member of the Downtown Board. So would somebody move the consent agenda, please? Mr. Bruder, Mr. Shaken seconds. Is there anybody who wishes to vote against the consent agenda? Then I will, all those in favor, raise your hand. I'm still operating under Zoom rules. We can actually vote these days. Okay, the consent agenda has been adopted unanimously. The next item is an item of old business. It is our affordable housing plan. Ms.
Linda
and Ms. Painter.
Linda, I welcome you back up.
Welcome again, and welcome.
So this item is back on the agenda because on June 23rd, as everybody recalls, there was a joint public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission to hear comment on the draft affordable housing plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission subsequently took this up at their July 6th meeting and passed it, I believe, unanimously. And so there would be further discussion with the town council as we move forward with implementation of the plan. But the next step would be action by the town council. So I don't know if Linda has anything she'd like to add.
Thank you. So, as mentioned, you had the public hearing on June 23rd, 2021, and our consultant, SLR International, presented the plan. There was significant public comment received throughout the process. The first survey that we sent out received, I believe, 880 responses, and the second one on the strategies was over 100, correct? 149. The Planning and Zoning Commission, when they discussed this on Monday night, there were a couple of key points that I wanted to highlight for the council. One was they really expressed, I would say, gratitude that they were able to meet with the council jointly to consider this and really want to continue forward at working with the council in a collaborative fashion to address affordable housing. They really appreciated that opportunity to hold a joint public hearing with you, and really would like to see that continue and moving forward as the plan is implemented. They also had some items that they discussed. Ultimately, as the town manager has referenced, they did adopt the plan unanimously without any changes. But I want to call attention to some of the things that they did note. One, they believe they need to go back and revise the zoning regulations as recommended by the plan to increase the number of affordable housing units. So I believe from currently required 10%, the recommendation is to go to a baseline of 12% of units as part of any new project being affordable to households at 80%. Of median income, because that will help us move forward. They did note that the 10% is kind of status quo. If we have 10% of every new project, that doesn't really increase our affordable housing percentage throughout town. It may increase the number of units that are available, but it's not really moving us forward in terms of overall increasing the percentage of units that are affordable. They also discussed concerns they had with various items, one being deed restrictions on for sale units, and really want to talk further about how that would be implemented, seeing, and that the devil is in the details when it comes to that particular item. There was discussion about the various funding mechanisms. And again, I think where they ended up and what we talked about was that the plan is really a toolkit. It provides a variety of tools and options for you to look at and to use to address the issue of affordable housing. I believe one of our members, as we talked about it, you said he really, through this process, kind of came to a change in how he views affordable housing, and that he now sees this as part of the town's overall infrastructure, and that's how it should be treated in terms of funding. So again, I think the reason that I think they ended up adopting it as presented was because they really did see it as a menu of options to choose from, and that going forward, you may make choices, just as the Planning and Zoning Commission did in adopting its zoning regulations, and recognizing you come back and tweak them and you make adjustments. You see what works, what does not. The plan provides mechanisms that fall within the realm of the Planning and Zoning Commission in terms of zoning recommendations. It also provides financing and funding recommendations, which really fall under the council. But again, I think, as the discussion you had earlier tonight showed, they really work together, and they're really two sides of the same coin. You have to talk about both the zoning pieces and the funding pieces together in order to have a cohesive strategy to increase affordable housing. But I think that provides a summation. I'll ask Jen to add anything. She was the project manager for this initiative and has done a wonderful job working with the ad hoc committee on affordable and workforce housing, as well as our consultants. And if you have anything.
I think you summarized it very well, Linda. Thanks.
Mr. Bruder, as chair of the commission, do you have comments?
I'd first like to say thank you to both Linda and Jennifer for being such great resources through this whole process. But in terms of the affordable housing motion that's in front of us, I would like to express my support for it as it is, as was stated. It really does give us the flexibility to emphasize and control the types of funding and the types of priorities that we do once we have that housing trust in place. So I hope that we can all approve it tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Osberger, you also served on the commission.
I would like to express my gratitude to everyone that worked on that. It was a broad spectrum of people that were involved. The collaboration was wonderful. There were incredible ideas that bounced around. Sam did a great job as chair, and the meetings ran very, very well, and it was just a blessing of ideas that just came through. Everything on there, I agree with one small little tiny detail, and that's the fee in lieu, or as I put it, indulgences, to the developers, because I had a feeling that the developers would end up doing an end run around giving us, the town, what we need. We need that 10%. We want that 10%, and it's a sad thing that this is where we are, because it really it kind of kneecaps us from achieving that goal of getting our 10%, and it emboldens or perhaps empowers these people to do the end run around getting us to our goal. So I don't know if this should go back to committee, or if we should change that rule, or we should. I don't know what to do here, but I think from my perspective, I think that I can't agree with, or I will vote no on this because of it.
Where is the payment in lieu of created? Is this a planning and zoning creation or a council creation?
In strategy 3.1, it says modify current inclusionary zoning requirements, and it speaks directly to the fact that we should increase the 10% to 12%. It doesn't say anything about fee in lieu, but that would be part of that. So I would suggest maybe adding something, modifying and revisiting that fee in lieu, or modifying the inclusionary zoning regulations is already a strategy in the plan itself.
Where, and can you tell me where in the plan you'd find this?
Page 16, strategy 3.1.
Page 16 of the plan, which...
Sorry, I have your packet in front of me.
Yeah, page 47. All right, and I don't see. Oh, I see it. Modify current, raising it to 12.
So I think what Jennifer's saying is that perhaps as a way to address that concern, because it is the increasing from 10% to 12%, you could modify this strategy to say, and also we need to reevaluate the use of the fee in lieu regulation. So currently, that is a case-by-case option. The way it was drafted, it's not an automatic guarantee. It is an option for density bonuses, but I think, if that's something that everyone is concerned about, and again, I would say that the PZC also addressed and discussed the need to go back and relook at those regulations in their entirety, but that might add some more detail to that.
That raises a question that I have. I am unclear about the legal status of the plan. If we adopt the plan, what does that bind us to do?
So the adoption of a plan is a statutory requirement. So that is something that the General Assembly has said every 5 years the town has to adopt a plan on how we're going to address affordable housing. I think this has a variety of strategies, and one item that Jen noted earlier today that again maybe another item that we can, or language that we can add, comes out of our plan of conservation and development, which is, some of you may recall when we were doing that plan back in 2015, there was a lot of concern because of all of the recommendations and that could quite frankly add up to tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, and is someone going to expect that we're automatically going to do this because it's in the plan? And so in every chapter of the action plan, we added a statement that said action plans set the agenda for our community's many officials, volunteers, committee members, and staff for the years ahead, and align their work with the community's vision, and in bold, but do not provide a guarantee that resources will be available to advance each action. And so adopting the plan, it basically adopts a toolkit for you to use, and then go forth and in order to actually implement the plan, there are various recommendations, changes to zoning regulations, consideration of establishing a housing trust fund. There are a variety of tools and mechanisms at your disposal. It does not mean you're going to adopt or implement every single one.
For example, suppose the council voted no to it, and this is purely hypothetical. The strategy is that the recommendation is a housing plan, the strategy is a housing trust, the recommendation is a housing trust. Suppose we vote no housing trust. What does that do? Have we violated the plan? Are we...
Someone from the Conservation Commission always talks about these plans as sort of enabling legislation for the town. And so that's how I always kind of describe. So our plan of conservation and development, this affordable housing plan is sort of, it just enables you to do certain things. But you don't have to do all of the things. It just sort of gives you, it's a toolkit, as we've said before.
Mr. Bruder, followed by Mr. Shaken, followed by Mr. Shuren.
I just wanted to point out that the charge that the ad hoc committee was given specifically says to develop this plan, and it says to review materials on the creation and research of and management of housing trust funds. It charges us to develop a draft ordinance establishing a housing trust fund, so we've already kind of bound ourselves into having a housing trust fund. But then we have to identify provisions for the management of that housing trust fund, identify provisions for the use and distributions of the funds, and identify potential sources of funding. Okay. So those last things are there's a set of options for us to choose from in this plan that we will then hammer out in our committee, bring back here into the planning and zoning for ordinance.
Okay, I was just trying to think of a single thing that I could think of that could contradict the plan, and I didn't mean to presuppose I was a purely law school hypothetical. Okay, Mr. Shaken.
So I had a quick thought about the fees and lieu. There was a saying, well, you could change something in the plan. I would recommend we not change anything in this plan, given that the Planning and Zoning Commission has has blessed it already, and given that everything in it is simply a recommendation of something we should consider doing in the future, I will just say, since it came up in public comment, my recollection, and I may be not exactly correct about this, is that the establishment of the fee in lieu is not something that the town council did or has control over. It's something that the Planning and Zoning Commission did, and in the rewriting of their regulations. I will point out, just to highlight something that Ms. Painter said, which is that it is not a fee in lieu by right, and that is something that the Planning and Zoning Commission has to approve on a case-by-case basis. It's a special permit. And so what our regulations currently say, and kudos to the Planning and Zoning Commission for writing them this way, is for any developer of housing units over a certain size, I don't remember exactly what it is, you must build a percentage, 10% of affordable units. You may apply for a fee in lieu, and the Planning and Zoning Commission may grant it, but they don't have to. And I think that was originally my recollection, is that was developed after a fair amount of feedback from the council saying we want this to go farther than the original draft. I like a lot of what's in this, as I said at the special meeting. Aside from that, I think the fee in lieu is a good thing. I can't think of another way for us to fund a housing trust fund that could make a meaningful impact on that 6.6% getting closer to 10 than by establishing a mechanism whereby the town can collect $1 million chunks at a time that could go towards a project that was much more geared to affordable housing than 10%. There's other ways we're going to have to do it. We won't be able to fund it through that alone, and I think there's some ideas in here, and I have some other ones. But I think a lot of what's in here is good and is something that we should do, and especially, I think it was 4 years ago that the Planning and Zoning Commission, maybe 3 years, said, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Would the council be interested in establishing a housing trust fund? And we said yes, and we're sort of just now getting around to the mechanics of how it would work. I will just point out something that came up in that public hearing, because I know it's something that has been of concern to some, and I think it's an interesting issue, which is our deed restricted units, which is what counts towards that state percentage, are low, although not lower than many other places. But when you actually look at what is and is not affordable just by what folks are charging at the market level right now, our affordable rate is actually much higher. And so I think it's an intriguing thought. Obviously, we need to focus on that percentage. It's an important state priority, but it's not the only priority that a community can have. And so I'm really just curious to continue to think about what are other things that we can do in our planning and zoning regulations, in the things that we do as a council to promote the development of housing that, even if it doesn't end up deed restricted, would still be affordable for someone who makes an income that would make them eligible for some deed restricted housing. And I'm especially intrigued on that front by item number 4 in this, which is to do more to enable middle housing, to make it a lot easier to develop multifamily, but duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, etc., things that could be denser housing, more sprinkled throughout our community, that don't involve a 400 unit, 350 market rate, 50 affordable unit development, which, as has been very correctly pointed out, there's no way we'll increase our percentage if all we do is increase the bottom, and as we're building affordable housing. So I hope we'll adopt it without changes tonight, and thank you for your work. It's a good plan.
Mr. Sherrod?
I have 2 quick questions, and first I want to thank you very much for your for the conversation we had this afternoon and the material that you sent to me, which was very helpful. Just 2 very quick questions, just to be sure. If we adopt this tonight, we are not, by adopting this, forcing the town to do anything different tomorrow than we're already doing, right? Okay.
Correct. And I would just for example, to clarify, to create a housing trust fund, this council has to take action to do so. So there's a process, and if you ultimately choose not to do so, that is your prerogative.
Second, just a small point of information. Maybe it's in here, maybe you know it off the top of your head. How many naturally occurring affordable units do we have in town? If all those were deed restricted, would we be meeting our quota?
Yeah, I would think so. That is somewhere, and if Patrick Gallagher were here from SLR, he would be able to answer that. I could dig through and get that answer later. Yeah.
And then, okay.
I know. I just wanted to add to that because I
Wait, excuse me, it's very hard to hear when there are second conversations going. Please.
I think, as Mr. Shaken noted, and you as well, Mr. Shuren, as you were speaking, it actually reminded me that one of the Commission's other points of discussion was a desire to try and work and lobby the legislature to better recognize those naturally occurring units. So for in mobile homes and modular units were one example that those are probably some of the more affordable units in town. However, they are not counted because they don't have an associated deed restriction. I will also note that during that discussion, it did come up, some concerns came up regarding taxation of those units, that while they depreciate in value, the personal property tax seems to continually increase. And we are not tax experts, so we can only flag that issue for discussion. But Jen, how many naturally occurring units do we have?
I saw page 30. It said the 6.6% constitutes 396 units of affordable housing.
Those are the deed restricted. So we have 6.6% of our units are considered by state statute as affordable.
So if I can just, I appreciate so much the work that this committee did and the work that you've done. And I initially had planned to offer an amendment, but being assured that nothing we pass tonight will require anything, then I will not do that tonight. I will be interested in following, as you said this afternoon, and certainly is true, the devil is in the details, and there are many, many details in a plan like this, some of which those of us with a little bit of experience in affordable housing know about, others that we can't even imagine. One that came to my mind was what happens to people whose income rises, and do they have to vacate the unit? There are other such concerns, and many communities have dealt with them in very creative ways, as the material you sent to me indicated. The goals, we all, the idea of opportunity for people to live here, the idea of stability for people who want to maintain stability. Also, to be blunt, the idea to have affordable housing that does not give people the opportunity to game the system. And the classic case is there are people who are technically in this income category, but perhaps because of their student status, and perhaps this is not what we want to end up doing. But that's a whole other question. I just want to iterate, as others have, I have a deep concern about for-purchase affordable units. I don't like them. I don't like them based on my experience many years ago on the Affordable Housing Committee in West Windsor, New Jersey, and what I have seen, because it creates a class of second-class homeowners who are not able, unless we create some very clever mechanism, to realize the appreciation of the value of their house. Also, the possibility, which I've seen elsewhere, of people who are of limited means finding themselves burdened with maintenance costs that they didn't anticipate. Some of this can be dealt with, and as this process continues through whatever body oversees it, I just want to make very, very sure that those concerns are appropriately dealt with.
Mr. Freudman, and then after Mr. Freudman, I think we're probably going to be ready for somebody to make the motion. Mr. Freudman.
Yes, well, it's true that the Planning and Zoning Commission can create the regulations. I'm not so sure that the council can then say the regulation provides for this or that, but we're just not going to create the mechanism for it. I have a problem with that. Also, I do have an even bigger problem with if you say to developers, well, you can apply for just paying a payment in lieu, that it can be denied or granted. I think that opens things up to some possible lawsuits where somebody said, well, you let that developer just pay his fee and go and do business, and somebody else you just deny it to. So I'm not sure that we should be creating a mechanism which allows things to be decided, enforcement of a regulation to be decided on an ad hoc basis. I'm going to echo some of the things that Charlie said. I don't like the idea of fee in lieu. I mean, either you have to provide so many units or you don't. If you provide a provision for paying fee in lieu, yes, it creates a huge administrative burden for the town to administer it. It's not that simple. You have to verify, I think, on a yearly basis whether the individuals involved still meet the income requirements and other things. It's just going to create a bureaucratic problem for us. Or you give you give it to the Mansfield, you create the trust fund and you let the Mansfield Housing Authority administer it. I don't like that idea either. I just think it almost sounds like a slush fund to me. So I will oppose it because I don't like the idea of creating a payment in lieu. And finally, let's understand that this is going to increase costs of construction in Mansfield. To developers, that just possibly makes units more expensive to rent for the people that aren't in the lower income category. So I'm not sure it's the best public policy, but that said, if there's a requirement to create some kind of a mechanism, I think we should be careful with it. And because I don't like the idea of payment in lieu, another thing, I won't approve, even if somebody makes an amendment that, let's approve this main motion if one is introduced soon. But we'll add language and an amendment to say, well, we're going to ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to revisit that and reconsider. If we approve it, they don't have to do it. They don't have to do. I don't want to approve an affordable housing plan that has that provision in there. Let them come to us with a modified agreement, and we'll consider it again at that time. So I will be voting no on the motion on page 29 if it is introduced. Thank you.
I think the plan before us requires collaboration and cooperation between a number of agencies and boards in the town, some of which this council has control over and others of which it has no control over. So I think that when the issues which you disagree with come up before the appropriate body, rather than lobby the council on those issues over which we have no control, it makes a great deal of sense to take your concerns to whichever body has that power, and that would include planning and zoning, the housing authority, the housing trust, if and when we create such a thing. I mean, I think this is a collaborative plan for the town as a whole, and it involves multiple bodies. So, Mr. Bruder.
I'd like to make the motion if I could.
Go right ahead, please.
I move effective July 12th, 2021 to adopt the affordable housing plan as presented at the public hearing on June 23rd, 2021.
Seconded by Mr. Shaken.
If I could just briefly say in favor of this, that I hope that we can all be unanimous with it. I understand that there are some reservations, but that the Ad Hoc Committee on Affordable Housing, which is not meeting on Wednesday but will be meeting in August, is one of those bodies that you can come and petition and try to shape our recommendation as going forward.
Mr. Shaken?
Just to add to what I said before, I meant to say this, that I'm very pleased to hear from Linda that the Planning and Zoning Commission enjoyed our meeting together. It's not always been the case that it's been easy to work collaboratively with the PCC, not for any differences in opinion, but just sort of differences in understanding of how collaborative we're allowed to be. And I just express my thanks to them and my desire to keep doing that with them and other government bodies. It really doesn't make sense for all of us to operate in a huge vacuum all the time. So I'm glad this committee's worked out, and I hope we can keep doing more of it.
Mr. Osberger?
Yes, I share in Mr. Shaken's sentiments, and of course his earlier comments all made very, very much sense, and of course many of the things that Mr. Bruder has just said. But again, I mean, raising the percentage or raising any set-asides to prevent this is only going to, again, as I say, embolden developers to just do an end run around. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a trust fund or anything like that made, and I agree that's a good policy. But again, I have concerns of when, how, and where those funds will be spent. that's another topic. But again, if we're going to set a goal in our town to have 10% of our housing to be affordable, then we shouldn't give developers a reason to not accept our rules or an opportunity. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Ms. Chang, would you call the roll?
Thank you. Osberger.
No.
Bruder.
Yes.
Bertoni.
No.
Freudman.
No.
Kotchenberger. Moran.
Yes.
Shuren.
Yes.
Shaken. Thank you.
The motion has been adopted. And we look forward to the Housing Committee working Commission working on this and hearing more from the Planning and Zoning, and if there's anything the council can do to assist in the legislative change that would allow us to count naturally occurring low-income housing, please let us know. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the proclamation designating the month of July as National Parks and Recreation Month. I know this is almost halfway through the month and we're a little late, but this has been a tradition that the council has adopted this proclamation. So, Mr. Aylesworth, would you start the discussion, and then we will call for a vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you say, this community has had a tradition for some number of years, it sounds like, as I understand it, designating July as Parks and Recreation Month. At the federal level, the Congress has designated July as National Parks and Recreation Month, at a recognition for all the myriad benefits that our parks and recreational areas and recreational pursuits and hobbies bestow on those that take part in them. Mental health, physical health, you name it. Only good comes from Parks and Recreation. So I don't know if our acting Parks and Recreation Director, Jay O'Keefe, who's here, has a few words he'd like to say. He's been waiting very patiently throughout tonight's proceedings.
Hey, Jay.
I think we can all use a moment of recreation after tonight's agenda items. Although very important, it's always important to take a step back and relax and find an outlet somewhere. So, as the town manager pointed out, and the mayor, we do this annually to bring further attention to the value of parks and recreation and all the services that the council supports and that the town staff work hard on and the community embraces. As you know, we have the community center, which is filled with an assortment of activities for all ages, but we also have outlets outside, which had never been used more in the past year during the pandemic, with all our our trails, open space areas, and our general parks and recreation areas outside. So anyhow, we want to bring recognition to Parks and Recreation Month, as we do each year, and our department will do what we can to promote and make the community aware of all the services that we have out there. I think we have our annual proclamation that the mayor will, hopefully with the town council support, will sign, and we'll get that up at the community center.
Terrific. And I think not only have people really appreciated parks and recreation outdoors during the past year and a half, but as the indoors are reopening, people really are glad to get back to what has been normal. Would somebody like to make the motion? It is on page 49. Mr. Osberger?
Yes, I'd like to put the motion on.
It's on page 49. Yep. Please go ahead.
I move effective July 12th, 2021, to authorize the mayor to issue the attached proclamation designating the month of July as National Parks and Recreation Month in Mansfield, Connecticut.
Seconded by Mr. Bruder. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I would. I think this is a wonderful idea. I think the Parks and Rec are very important in the town of Mansfield. It's always been a very strong program in the town of Mansfield. They offer a lot to our community, and I wholeheartedly agree and support this 100%.
And any further discussion of the motion? Mr. Katzenberger?
Only just I just wanted to use this opportunity to thank Parks and Rec and under your leadership and Kurt's before that over the last year and a half. I mean, it's extraordinary how many departments came together, and Parks and Recreation really stands in that crowd very well. You've created the opportunities. You were very, I think, creative in creating these opportunities, and they made a lot of difference to a lot of people's towns. So thank you.
Mr. Osberger?
And I'd just like to add that my daughter has had the opportunity to take advantage of all of the many years that she was able to.
Thank you. All right. Is there anybody who's going to vote against the proclamation? Don't you dare. I sense some bullying tactics from our minority representative. All right. I think raise your hand if you support the proclamation. I think we are unanimous. Thank you once again for the work that you and your staff have done over this year and a half. And anything we can do to help, please.
Well, we certainly appreciate the council's support, and our staff is certainly happy to be out there and serving the community. So thank you very much again. Have a good night.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Mansfield Middle School roof project. And I'd like to welcome back Paul Shapiro, who is with Kelly Lyman, and I think maybe I would ask you to introduce the rest of your table. Mr. Aylesworth, do you want to introduce them?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in addition to Mr. Shapiro and Kelly Lyman, Superintendent, we're joined by Alan Corson, who's the Director of Facilities, and Paul Jorgensen with Silver Petroselli. And this project, which everybody's very excited about, has encountered a bit of a snag in terms of the availability of much needed roof insulation material. Kind of a global shortage that the folks here will be able to speak to in more detail and talk about project completion timeline and where we go from here in terms of a modified project schedule.
Madam Mayor, thank you, Town Manager. I want to make sure that I'm speaking into the correct mic. There's a number of mics so that I can be.
Turn the light on.
Ryan, you know, back in my day, the mic was always on.
That one's broken.
First I want to thank you, Charlie. I want to say first of all how happy I am to be here, to see all of you in person. This place was my home for 8 years, and I loved my time here. And it's just, although I've spoken to this group via Zoom, it's different when you're in person. I'm very fond of baseball analogies, and before I turn the meeting over to the professionals, I will make one. Pretty much anybody in the big leagues can hit a home run if you throw them a fat pitch down the middle. But there are a lot of big leaguers who cannot hit a curveball. This project has had nothing but sweeping curveballs over the last couple of months, and the question is, how do we respond to it? There are two primary issues here. The first are the technical details of when and how are we going to get the necessary supplies to finish this project. The industry-wide shortages and disruptions in the supply chain, the experts can talk about, particularly Paul Jorgensen, who designs roofs for middle schools all over the state. And the second issue, which is why the school superintendent is here, is that if there's one thing that anybody who's either been a student at MMS or an MMS parent, as I have been, knows, it's this. School is terribly important, and extracurriculars, most of which meet after school, are really what makes our middle school very, very special. It's where students develop their interests, a lot of their friendships that turn into be lifelong friendships. After school activities are important. So if you're going to alter the construction schedule, what does that mean to the academic portion of the day and the after school portion of the day? First, I want to turn over to Alan to talk a little bit about where we are in the project with any supplementation from Paul, and then to Kelly.
Hi, good evening. Just to give you a little rundown, at the start of this project, we've been pretty much on schedule with the project. Things started to slow down with our application to the state for their portion of this, and it put us in a place where we were a little late getting out to bid on this, even though when we did go to bid, we were assured that they were still going to be able to perform for the summertime. Couple of weeks after the bid was awarded, we started hearing about the shortage of materials. So that's why I'll let Paul here address some of that.
Thank you, Alan. Good evening, everyone. This is not a this situation is as has been said is statewide, and it's actually region-wide. Not only has the contractor for this project expressed difficulty getting materials for this particular roof, but we've seen this example from many contractors in many towns all over Connecticut right now. There are in our office, this was, I think, the third roof that week that was delayed from this summer either to next year or to later in the year. Contractors just can't get materials for, and it's really unprecedented. We've not seen this before. So this contractor has proposed not to delay till next year, as Paul Shapiro has said, but offered to do a second shift roof in October when materials are available. That gives us a short window, a short season to do this, because we can't do it in the winter. But we think that with cooperation and working with the school, and we're going to have to work around their operations to not disturb during the day and extracurricular in the evening, that material will be available and the roof can be done this year. That's the overview. If there are any particular questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
I'll just add that we had a great conversation with the contractor. We talked about all of the questions and challenges that are presented when you try to do a roof during operations, and they've given us assurances that they can work around all of the needs. They have experience having done this. I felt satisfied that they would certainly work with us, and I think, you know, barring any weather issues, we should be able to get this roof done by the heavy snows, certainly.
What happens if the old roof is stripped off and we have a blizzard?
The process that they use is that they'll rip a section. Typically, they're looking at the weather ahead of time before they start into that. But they'll rip an area, and before the night's over, they have that area covered. So it's area by area. They just keep moving along around the roof.
Mr. Shagan, followed by Mr. Osberger.
Keenly aware of how quickly it seems like it's all of a sudden dark by the time the late buses would come to the middle school in October. So I'm guessing lights are part of the second shift, that we're not just sort of going until 7 and then quickly 6, 5, and okay.
No, primarily they'll be setting up lightings that will pretty much make it look like daylight on top of the building there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Osberger, followed by Mr. Bruder.
Mr. Corson, yeah, of course, we all know problems with construction and delivery, so you assume there was going to be some schedule delays. Is there a temperature restriction? In other words, as we get further into the fall, perhaps, is it going to be difficult heating?
His problem that he's indicated is mostly to do with the dew that can form on the roof, and then making sure they don't encounter that. But with their scheduling and watching that, that's how they avert that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bridger? As somebody who has twins starting at the middle school this fall, I'm glad to hear that there's going to be some accommodations in terms of, you know, not impacting the academics. With that said, you know, I'm assuming that this contractor is somebody that you know, it was good to hear that Superintendent Lyman, that you trust that what they're going to say they're going to do. If there are any further delays, does that just push it into next summer? Like in terms of, you know, we get to September and we're still not able to get those materials, you know, that sort of deal.
The short answer is yes. If there are delays beyond what we're being told right now, then you can't roof through the winter. We wouldn't recommend roofing into January and February. Our goal is to get as much of it done as possible, 100%. They have a window to do it at this point. Weather is always a factor. And when we say weather, it's not necessarily freezing temperatures. It just could be precipitation. You can't roof if it's raining, and they know that from the summer. They know it from winter. So there is a chance that things could be delayed until spring. And then we could go back to the same scenario that it could be second shift in the spring. There will be a winter break no matter what, whether the project's 100% complete or there are little things to do, punch list items.
Go ahead, Mr. Bridger.
Thank you. Just to follow up, is there a priority of sections on the building that we're looking to do first? I know that there's been leaks in certain classrooms in certain areas, so I would hope that we have identified, like, let's get this section done before the winter. Let's get this. You know, I'm guessing. I've not been involved in the process, but
We haven't spoken on a leak by leak basis, but what we have discussed is, because it's a roof and PV project, that PV will follow, and PV is not on every roof because some orientations are more beneficial than others. The initial goal was to get the roofs that had the PV done first, and we haven't gone into that level of detail with the contractor yet in terms of his schedule because of the delay right now. We're in a holding pattern, but now we will be getting an interim schedule of which roofs first and the rationale, the logic behind it. So that really, we're early in the game for that because we can't start until later.
Any further questions? Mr.
I'm
Shapiro?
going to conclude by noting that even before this supply chain issue came up, the roofing committee, the middle school roof building committee, made a decision to hire an owner's rep to oversee the general contractor. It's the same company, although not necessarily the same individual, who are working with the school building committee. And there is a tremendous concern that this be done right and that the taxpayers get the project that they want and that they deserve, and that our current and future middle school students benefit from this. So that owner's representative will be working with the contractor. One of the things about Alan that I've observed over many years is he not only oversees all construction projects, big and small, he's also responsible for the maintenance of every single town and school facility. And because of our desire, we know how good Alan is, and we know what he does every single day. But we wanted there was money in the bonding for this project to do this, and it's not going to cost a tremendous amount of money. we wanted somebody to oversee, as the building committee's representative, the work. Not that Alan, you could say it's the belt and suspenders approach.
Belt and suspenders.
Belt and suspenders, yes.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you all for hanging in through this meeting. I know you all have full work days, and so sorry to keep you so late, but thank you very much for the report. It's very helpful.
And thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks to my colleagues, my good colleagues, my old colleagues, and my new colleague on the council.
All right, the next item on the agenda is report of council committees. Does finance have a report?
No, we canceled the meeting in large part because we didn't have a pressing agenda item after the budget was over, but also because of the conversion to the different the payment finance,
the new
system.
management
right.
system.
So we did. Charmaine and I did talk about the agenda for the next meeting. So
Okay. Committee on committees. I know that you had some recommendations. The appointments were made as part of the consent agenda.
Very happy that we were able to do that. We will be meeting again in August, where the main agenda topic will be the human services charge.
Okay.
And then for the Affordable Housing Committee, we are not meeting on Wednesday. We will be meeting next month to discuss a lot of the feedback we've gotten today.
Thank you. And Ms. Berthelot isn't here for personnel. Mr. Shuren?
Yeah, I was just looking at, we have not met, I was looking at my calendar to see when we have a scheduled meeting, and
I don't think your microphone is on.
I'm sorry. Just looking to see the schedule for our meeting, but we will be meeting before the next.
Okay. Do you know when the report on the evaluation of town managers will be ready?
I cannot answer that off of, perhaps Ryan, you've had some discussions with Terry about that.
So I haven't had any conversations with Terry. I do have regular conversations naturally with Holly Schaefer, our Human Resources Director, who's the staff liaison to all this. And I do know that David O'Brien, the principal of the organization that's sort of facilitating the review process, he has completed his analysis and I believe is drafting a report.
Okay. I hope we get it sooner rather than later.
I share that interest.
Yes, I'm sure you do. All right. Is there anything on departmental and advisory committee reports? Anything on petitions, requests, and communications?
Mayor,
Go ahead.
I just have a comment on in paragraph 11, 11F, under petitions, requests, and communications. I see that PZC is proposing and is going to, I guess, promote it in PZC about turning Browns Road.
No, it's an application from the residents to declare Browns Road a scenic area, and it has to be considered by planning and zoning. It's not a planning and zoning initiative.
I stand corrected. I mean, I don't have a big problem with it, but considering the agribusiness that's going in there and the concerns about traffic, if you turn something into a scenic road, you're pretty restricted on what kind of improvements you can make on it. Just saying. So, but
I think that was the strategy from the neighbors who have been trying to fight Agbotic.
That won't stop the company from coming in. They'll just say, well, traffic, if you have to widen the roads, do it. But then if you turn it into a scenic road, it would be an extra problem.
I actually looked at the ordinance on scenic roads. They can be widened and paved and maintained. So I don't know what the full implication is, but oddly enough, the road surface can be changed. Mr. Ausberger has requested an item for a future pre-meeting, so it's not an agenda item. Are there any other requests for an addition to future agendas? All right. Then I think we're ready to go into executive. Mr. Shaken?
I'd like to move that we enter into an executive session in accordance with Connecticut General Statute Section 1-200, and that we invite to that executive session Attorney Deneen and Town Manager Ellsworth and anyone else?
Ms. Painter?
And Linda Painter.
It's moved and seconded by Mr. Osberger. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. We are going to go into executive session, so we'll take a recess for 3 or 4 minutes while people clear out. Is Mr. Deneen in the building?
I'm going to be patching him in on the phone, and we have the.
Okay, good.